Hey everyone, Tankenstein here, and in this video I'll be showing you every single vehicle coming to the major update, La Royale, at least the vehicles that are being shown in the dev server right now. So it might not be every single vehicle, and if I miss any, definitely tell me in the comments below so you can let other people know as well. But this will hopefully be a very much comprehensive video, again, on every single vehicle that is currently in the dev server that you can expect to see in just a few weeks. So first and foremost, as you can see here, I will start with the Americans, and we have the M4 T26. This is pretty much an M4 Sherman with a T26 turret and cannon, the M3 cannon that you find on the M26. Now, it's pretty much the same exact thing. It's got the M82, it's got the same turret armor, but of course it's mounted on a Sherman. Surprised that this is not a premium vehicle, but very, very happy that it is not. Next up, we have the M1 KVT. This is the Krasnovian variant tank. This is going to be a $60 premium, if I'm not mistaken, 10.3 BR, rank 6, and bear in mind, you have to remember that these vehicles, all the BRs, all the stats, everything, they can change up to and even after the release because this is the dev server. So all of these, everything in this is, still not final. But this is pretty much just a regular M1 Abrams. It should be the M1A1 as many people have pointed out, but just for sake of balancing, they decided to put a fake tank in here as the M1 KVT with a 105 rather than the 120. Those are not real ERA, rather those are just regular, those are pretty much just cosmetic. Right now it doesn't show as anything, but I wouldn't be surprised that if once this vehicle does come out, it will have sheet metal or something like that where it's like 5mm of armor, kind of like this, for example. But we'll have to wait and see. But otherwise, this is pretty much just your standard M1 Abrams. It's got all the same armor. It's got all the same mods, for example, so it's pretty much the same, and you could even remove the Viz mod. As you can see there, it gets rid of 500, or actually it adds 500 kilograms to, let me see that, So by adding the Viz mod, you actually lose weight on this vehicle, it looks like, at least just per the dev server, so we'll have to wait and see, but it looks like it loses weight once you equip the Viz mod. Actually, no, that's not true. So once you de-equip it, it's 56.2 tons, and then once you equip it, yeah, it is true. Wow. So somehow all this stuff makes it lose weight. Anyways, for the rest of it, for the Americans, you have the BF2C1. This is a reserve fighter. Pretty cool. They're getting it. It is a biplane, so it's the first reserve biplane for the Americans. Nothing all too crazy interesting, but the one that most people are going to be interested about is the F-14B, and this is a very interesting vehicle indeed because it has brand new engines that have around 2,000 kgf extra thrust per engine, so around 4,000 in total, or around 25% extra in total between these engines, which is fantastic and will be a much faster aircraft with those. Additionally, you have the AIM-54Cs, which is great. Those will be a little bit heavier in the AIM-54As, but they will also be able to track a bit better. You also have more countermeasures as well as AIM-9Ls, so very powerful vehicle, just got even more powerful, and at least in theory, it's only 0.3 BR higher than what we see on the F-14A. Now, there are no coastal vehicles for the US, nor are there any blue water or helicopters, so the thing that you're going to notice with these new updates is that there aren't really a ton of vehicles. Like back in the day when it was just US, Germany, USSR, Great Britain, and Japan, you only had, each country got a ton of vehicles. Nowadays, it's kind of split pretty evenly between them. But that said, for Germany, we have the Panzer 38T, which features slightly lesser armor, but a much more powerful engine with 195 horsepower unmodified at 11.5 tons, compared to the F version, which is 111 horsepower at 10.1 tons, again unmodified. Of course, this does have a little bit less armor, but it does have a substantially better power to weight ratio and top speed. Next up for Germany, we have the Raketen Automat. This is a 7.3 BR tank destroyer that will sit just after the Jagdtiger in the tank destroyer tech tree. Now, this is very interesting because it has pretty much the same hull as what we find on the Raketen Jagdpanzer II, as well as the JPZ-45. However, it has less armor and also has less weight and also has lower horsepower. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how this plays, but right now it doesn't have the best power to weight ratio. Otherwise, it does have the same exact cannons as what you find on the USH 405, or pretty much the same cannon. Of course, again, this is not completely modeled well, so you only have one of these that actually has ammo in it. We'll have to wait and see if that's actually how it will play in the dev server, but again, very, very interesting vehicle, and pretty much just the German version of the USA 405. Germany gets no helicopters, but they do, of course, get aircraft with the Su-22M4. Now, this is pretty much just going to be more or less about the same as the Su-17M4. It's got the same modifications, more or less. It's got the R60MKs, which is really nice. Those are all-aspect missiles, of course. Now, with pretty much every vehicle at and around top tier, they all have these parachute or slow drop bombs, the retarded bombs. So it's pretty interesting how it will be, but again, I mean, this is pretty much just an R-17, or an Su-17 rather, M4 for the Soviets, except in the German air tech tree. Next up, we have the Z-46, which is just slightly better than the Z-43 in that the shells that it fires are a little bit better. I believe it has a little bit more armor, and it does weigh a little bit more overall, but otherwise, it's pretty much going to be about the same vehicle, so pretty cool, but nothing too earth-shattering. Next, we have the Russians, and the Russians have a few extremely interesting vehicles, to say the least. First, we have the BTR Ada. This is surprisingly only a 5.7 BR, but it makes some level of sense given that it has not the best turret traverse speed, hardly any armor. An HMG will be able to penetrate through this thing throughout a large amount of the hull, as well as the fact that it really doesn't have the best cannon, at least the best shells for its cannon. So as you can see, its highest penning shells are 65 millimeters, which is still pretty decent at this BR, especially if you can get into a side shot position, but that's really it. It lacks thermals, it only has night vision, which at this BR doesn't really matter all too much. It's just more of one of those things where it's like, spend an extra 1500 RP. This is like going to be the last mod that you get for this vehicle, so it doesn't really matter all too much. So at 5.7 BR, not all too bad. It'll be interesting to see if this goes up in BR. For all I know, I could be heavily underestimating it, and it could be much better than that, but we'll have to wait and see. And of course, because you guys want to see it, this is the BTR Ada in game, so pretty damn good looking vehicle. Next, we have the Object 435, which will be just before the T-64A, will more or less function very similarly to the T-62, T-64 vehicles. This has the same 115mm cannon that you can expect on, I believe it's the T-62 has that same cannon, and it's got the same exact armor, or the ammo rather, so it's got the 3PM4, BM3, and also the BK4, pretty good. And also this looks like a very small vehicle. It has no composite armor. Now bear in mind, again, this is the dev server, so anything can change, but at least as of right now, this has decent armor, but not really all too much, and it's kind of like a light-ish medium tank. Especially once you fully upgrade that engine, it should have a pretty good power to weight ratio, so I am pretty darn stoked about this vehicle. Plus, it is fully stabilized, as you can see. Just do the X-ray over horizontal aiming drive, and you can see gun stabilizer, yes. Next, for the Russians, something that a lot of people are probably not going to be very happy about, but we have them coming to game anyways, the Su-25T and the Su-39, which are more or less about the same type of vehicle. So as you can see here, I'm just going to start off with the Su-39. It looks brilliant with that, by the way, that camouflage. There are no additional camouflages as of right now, but it will have some really nasty weapons. So first and foremost, some people might be saying, but what's the difference between this, the 25TK, and also the regular 25, right? So now we have 4 Su-25s essentially in game variants therein, and 2 of them are premium, 2 of them are regular tech tree vehicles. Well, that's a good question. So the Su-25T and the K both have this UMPO R195 engine. This engine is actually substantially more powerful, or at least a decent amount more powerful than what you have in the regular Su-25s at the lower BR. So these have 3,530 kgf of takeoff thrust. These have 3,910. Also, these weigh a bit more, at least again per the dev server, 990 kilograms. These are only 860. So it's a pretty big difference in terms of performance, and you should see much better performance out of this, at least in theory, unless of course this weighs more in other areas that I just don't really see. Now, another thing about these vehicles is that, at least per what the dev server overview said, the live stream from Gaijin, is that the back of this has some sort of like an IRCM system, I think they said, in which what that means is that, at least on these planes, it'll make it so that radar or infrared missiles, rather, like IR heat-seeking missiles, will not be able to track you as easily, or rather they have to get closer to you to actually successfully track you, which is going to be very interesting. So this might not be as easy to kill versus other aircraft as some people might think. So that'll be pretty darn cool. But otherwise, the Su-25T and the 39 are about the same vehicle. As you can see, I mean, this has retarded bombs, this has guided weapons, all those things. The 29TL and Cab 500KR, all very powerful. This has pretty much the same exact weapon loadout. Now the difference here is that, as you can see, this has 16 armament presets, this has 19. The only real difference that you're going to see here is that this has all multi-purpose weapons. That's how they're all grouped, whereas the 25T, you have air targets and also 2 armor target sections. So not really all too much of a difference. And additionally, when it comes to the 39, this has the Copio 25 radar pod, whereas this has the Mercury targeting pod. So I'm not really sure exactly what the difference is. If you guys know, let me know in the comments below, but that's pretty much it when it comes to those two vehicles. Now, when it comes to ships, they have the Bravi, which is going to be a 5.3 BR destroyer. It's in its own line in the Blue Water Fleet, so I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it might have something to do with the fact that this has the Volna N missile launcher, so we'll have to wait and see. But that is a surface-to-air missile with a lot of power behind it. It weighs 912 kilograms. This is a huge missile, and will be pretty interesting. But as of right now, you know, you don't really see people cooperating so much when it comes to naval. So you don't have like 2 people in battleships and then 2 people covering the air. You know, it's just everybody doing their own thing. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how much that actually does in game. Next, for Great Britain, we have another vehicle coming to all important South Africa. I believe it was the South African tech tree, and we have the 1.3 PR Sarc Mark IV A. This is going earliest entry into that, so people can just kind of get a jump start into it. It's got a 2-pounder. It's got very fast reload. It's going to be very light. It's got a great power to weight ratio. This is unmodified engine. It's already got over a 20 horsepower per ton power to weight ratio, so this thing should be a hell of a fun vehicle to play. But of course, very little armor, so you're going to have to watch out versus HMG carrying vehicles. Unfortunately, that seems to be about it for the British. Now, bear in mind, if I forget anything, if I miss anything, or if they mention something in the dev server that I may have forgotten about, tell me in the comments below, because I want to make sure that this video and the corresponding comments are as accurate as possible and tell you as much as you need to know about everything that's coming to this game. But when it comes to Great Britain, it appears as though, at least again on the dev server, that is about it. You only have the Sarc right there, the Mark IV-A, no helicopters, no aviation, but you do get the HMS Daring, which I'm sure no one's going to care about. This is a rank 3 4.7 BR destroyer, which is kind of cool, I suppose, right? I mean, looks cool, but again, Blue Water Fleet, not a ton of people play it. Next up, we have Japan, and as you might guess, they are not getting all too much from Papa Gaijin this update. However, they are getting the Type 87 RCV Prototype, or P, which is going to be a rank 4 battle rating 5.7 vehicle. Now, a lot of people might say to themselves, what the? That's ridiculous. Well, it's pretty darn similar to the BTR in that it will have a pretty toned down set of ammunition options. Plus, this only has an RH-202 20mm cannon, so it's not very impressive of a vehicle. This is pretty much just something that you take around town, maybe go fishing with. This is not so much a war fighting vehicle, but of course it is here in War Thunder, but in America, we would just kind of call that a going around car, a town car, if you will. Unfortunately, they're not getting anything for aviation, but they are, of course, getting a new vehicle, a new top-level battleship, the Issei class Issei, the IJN Issei, which is going to be absolutely huge, 40,000 plus tons, with 36 centimeter cannons. Of course, this will have 12 of them in total with 6 turrets. Absolutely crazy vehicle. This thing will be extremely powerful in naval, but of course not many people play naval, unfortunately. But man, oh man, if I had this thing, I would love to play it. So here we are kind of in the home stretch here. We are with China now, with the Object 211, which will sit at the same BR and the same grouping as the PT-76. Now this is something I've not seen much of until just now. They are starting to group more vehicles, which I wonder if that's coincidence. I would like to think that it is, but it's pretty cool. This is pretty much going to be about the same exact vehicle, more or less, how it performs as the PT-76. However, it does have a different cannon. It's got an 85mm cannon with 135mm of armor pen with that, 164 with that shell, but more or less about the same. You know, I mean, it's going to weigh a little bit more, have more horsepower, going to be a little bit faster, and of course not going to be stabilized either, but we're going to have to wait and see exactly how that thing performs. But at 5.0 BR, it might be actually very, very powerful. Next up, we have the ZTZ-88B. This is a, I don't know, rank 6, battle rating 8.7, Chinese medium tank. Should be pretty interesting. I mean, I say that with every single tank, so my apologies. It's got composite armor, as you can see. It's got a 105mm cannon. It's got Type 83 heat, which goes through about 400mm of armor. Type 83 APDS, which is actually APF SDS, which goes through over 330mm of armor. Again, all at max. As with so many other Chinese tanks, this is pretty much just like an overall decent tank. It's got good armor, it's got a good cannon, it's got good speed, it's got good pretty much everything, or at least decent pretty much everything. Doesn't really stand out in too many ways. Next up, for China, we have the J8F. This was one of the stars of the show when it came to the trailer that came out. So as you can see here, I mean, this thing is just gnarly looking. It's got more powerful engines than the J8B. It's just a better vehicle overall in terms of performance. However, what most people are going to be looking at are the weapons, and this has the PL8, which is going to be all aspect missiles. It has more or less equivalent, roughly equivalent to the AIM-9Ls, and also, of course, PL11s, which are going to be roughly equivalent to later variants, kind of later variants, at least what we currently have in War Thunder, of the AIM-7 Sparrow. Also, of course, it's got bombs of all different types, but nothing all too crazy. This is not going to be one of those vehicles that you take out and use as a dogfighter. Okay, I think I fixed it. So you have the PL5Bs, you have the PL... Let's just do this, right? Like PL8. So you can have actually a really nicely assorted missile loadout, and even the PL5Bs are not bad at all. Just because they look like this does not mean that they're bad. So this can be actually a really, really effective dogfighter in close, medium, and long range. So pretty damn impressive, actually. Now, for Italy, we have the Tornado ADV, which I'm sure most people probably aren't really going to care too much about. Tornadoes are kind of a little bit outclassed, but this does have, it looks like 4 AIM-9Ls, is that? That's a weird one. Okay, yeah, it's got 4 AIM-9Ls, so that's really, really neat. It's also got some Skyflash Super Temps. Looks like you can actually equip all of these in the same loadout, so actually this might be pretty effective as a kind of close to medium range, or as a medium-ish range fighter, because of course it's not going to have great turning capabilities, but it is still pretty damn quick. Now, of course, when it comes to Italy, there are no blue water or coastal fleet options, but when it comes to France, the main star of the update, so to speak, which is why it's called La Royale, that is what we are getting. A lot of French vehicles, at least relatively speaking. First and foremost, we have ourselves the AF1, the ALF or AF1, or however it's pronounced. This thing is pretty much a house on wheels, or on tracks rather. This thing, like, look at this, the huge ready racks, and I think this might be auto-loaded. Yeah, it says automatically loading, so it's got a 7.5 second reload rate for this massive 155mm howitzer. It's got the M110, the smoke shell is just what's immediately on there. So this also has variable time fuse shells, okay, as well as the OE-155-56, which has 6.8 kilograms of explosive filler. That is going to be a hell of a nasty shell. I cannot wait to take this thing out to battle. And also, for the size of this vehicle, it has a pretty decent turret traverse rate. Now, for aviation, we have two vehicles, the Lancaster MR, or the Marine Reconnaissance, I think is what it is. 7, the MR7. So it's a 5.0 BR bomber, nothing all too crazy. I mean, bombers are bombers. Really pretty cool looking vehicle in my opinion. It's cool that that's in the French air tech tree, but more importantly, or what more people are going to be looking at, the Mirage 2005F. This is the new 12.0 BR French aircraft. And so it's going to have, at least again, this is just what's on the dev server. It's got R550s, R530D, and F missiles, as well as obviously a bunch of bombs. It's got snake eyes, which are going to be really, really interesting in how they are used. I saw some gameplay with that, so we'll have to wait and see exactly how that is, but this is pretty much the new top dog for the French air tech tree. And here we are with the Blue Water fleet. The rest of the, at least part of the update is here, so we're not actually seeing every single vehicle that will be available. From what I've heard, there are going to be more vehicles coming to War Thunder in this update for the French Blue Water fleet. But here you have it. You have the Colbert heavy cruiser. You have a light cruiser at 5.0, a 5.3 BR heavy cruiser, 8 203mm cannons. Should be pretty damn nasty. We have a 4.7 BR light cruiser. Not too bad. So, I mean, this might actually be a very, very powerful lineup or tech tree when we're seeing that low of a BR for those vehicles. Those are pretty low BRs for those types of vehicles. Next, we have the Swedish, and the Swedish have a Sherman coming to town with the 3.4. This is a bit of a funky looking one. We don't have any sort of MG port, no HMG on top. This is just a very strange looking Sherman indeed, and something that I think a lot of people are going to enjoy, but the fact of the matter is it's just more or less a regular Sherman tank. 3.7 BR, not sure exactly how much GE it's going to cost, probably around 1,000, maybe up to 1,500, but interestingly, by purchasing this, you will be able to have the Sherman T-34 and also a Panzer IV all at the same BR in the same lineup. So pretty darn cool. Next up, we have the CV9030 Fin, which is the Finnish vehicle. I'm actually kind of surprised it's not over here. Isn't this the Finnish ground tech tree over there? Anyways, doesn't really matter all too much. Maybe it just didn't fit over there. I'm not entirely sure. Anywho, so this vehicle will be pretty powerful. I'm actually kind of surprised it's at 9.0 BR. Considering that it's got the MK258 shells, which are APFSDS, with over 110 millimeters of armor pen. This will have thermals, which I'm assuming are ranked or tier 2 or gen 3 rather, and also a laser rangefinder at first level. So this will be a very powerful vehicle. Again, kind of surprised that it's this low of a BR, but we'll have to wait and see if it's actually effective or not. But it's going to have a ton of horsepower, power to weight ratio, and will be a very effective vehicle. Then finally, to end Sweden, we have the AJS-37, which is pretty much just an upgraded variant of the AJ-37. This will have access to RB-75s, which are pretty much Maverick missiles, as well as the RB-24J, which is rear aspect, as well as, more importantly, the RB-74. So this is pretty much just going to be like your all-purpose strike aircraft, if you will. Not going to be quite as good as the JA-37D. As you can see, I mean, you get more RB-74s, you get access to the RB-71s. So this will still be the dominant dogfighter, but the AJS-37 should still be pretty damn good when it comes to attacking aircraft, if need be. Will at least give you that level of flexibility that the AJ-37 lacks. And finally, for Israel, we are getting hardly anything, but we are getting the Magok Hydra. This is another folder vehicle. Again, wonder if that's a surprise or if that's a coincidence rather. We'll have just a bunch of Hydra missiles that are aimed very high relative to the cannon, so you are really going to have to aim low with this in order to hit anything at close range. But if you're familiar with the LAV at all, this is very similar to that. So it should be a pretty interesting vehicle, but more or less is kind of like any of the other rocket tank vehicles. But again, that looks like it's about it. So let me know if I missed anything in the comments below. I try to go through this as quickly as possible. This is probably like a half-hour long video, so my apologies for that. But again, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.